Welcome to the Copilot Connection. We're here to share with you all the news, insights and capabilities of the Microsoft Copilot ecosystem across the entire Microsoft stack. Now, this is our regular deeper dive into the more dev side of Copilot and agents. I'm Kevin McDonnell, an MVP for Copilot and Copilot Extensibility, and also the UK lead for Copilot and agents at Avanade.
Hi everyone, my name is Garry Trinder. I am developer advocate at Microsoft. And I'm focusing on Microsoft 365 Copilot at the moment, lots of other things as well, get Copilot always. But yeah, the point of these episodes really is to kind of just have a bit more of a talk about the tools, techniques, frameworks, things that people are doing out there in the community in AI land to basically do more as developers. Kev, what have we got in store for people this week?
I was going to let this go, but just for everyone, yes, we are trying a new intro for this one to make a thing. So it was absolutely seamless there, Gary. I don't think anyone noticed us kind of hesitating at all.
You made me do it, Kev. You made me do it.
Touche. But I'm going to say this publicly. The reason I wanted to change it is always felt like the last few episodes, Gary's been there as a guest, a regular guest, and I think of him as a co-host. So I wanted to spin it round a little bit from there. So it's because I love you, Gary.
It's good to be here, Kev.
Oh, look, did you ever hear Scott Mills, who always drops in "love you" at the end, then wait to see what everyone else does? That felt like that moment. I feel dropped entirely. Anyway, what are we talking about this week? We're kind of going into agents, but we said in there, this is about how you build agents and things on there. So we have our regular Monday chat on what's going on, and we kind of keep coming back to coding agents and kind of what they are. I think Claude Code has had a lot of it in the news. I know many of your colleagues are apparently now using it at Microsoft to compare things, which is fascinating, and things on there. And I think a lot of people who've seen GitHub Copilot and maybe used it on and off see it as it sits there while you're doing coding and does that intelligent kind of recommendation. But I don't think everyone's kind of seen this new world of Clauding agents that go above and beyond that. So we thought today we'd talk about what they are, what the different ways of doing that is. Yes, there are things other than GitHub Copilot, so we'll touch on a few others. I think we're also going to go into the changing the habits. And this is one I'm particularly keen on because I still haven't got my head around using them. I kind of have to push myself to use them and it doesn't always feel quite right. So we're going to talk a bit about how you build those habits. We're going to talk about some of the challenges for those who've heard about Claudebot now, and I actually have to look this up because I forgot what it's called already. Maltbot is a new name for it, which I have only just found out on there. So some of the challenges and risk around that, and then we'll cover some of that how to learn a little bit. I think we'll probably cover that as we go along rather than a little bit. Got Gary here. I forgot I put this old age coding on there, and I think that's about your new laptop, isn't it? I put that note for myself to try and mock you slightly.
Yeah, getting a new laptop and being able to go, ooh, actually I can work in different places around the house, which I have been doing all week, and then realizing that sitting on a sofa and working on in a kitchen counter is like, yes, I can do it, but then after a week I feel like I need to be back at my desk because I'm gonna be my back's hurting already. So,
I think it was Chris Huntingford. Chris Huntingford had a LinkedIn post back in November of him sitting on the floor doing a client call. And my first thought was, I couldn't do that for more than about 5 minutes before I was just kind of wriggling or feeling sore. So,
it's
old age
coding.
Of
pain after doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I'm going to hand over to you. What on earth is a coding agent?
Yeah, well, I guess coding agents is kind of like the next leap, right? We've had leaps all the way along with development tools in the past. Like, remember when we were doing things in like text editors, right? And we wouldn't even have IntelliSense, and the improvements in IntelliSense that came along. You'd have extensions. Like, I always remember using ReSharper in Visual Studio and going, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, it's going to look at your code and it's going to make recommendations, and it's very static, but still at that time was like, X what you're doing, to the point where I would be kind of amazed by the work that some people would do. And then later on, I found out that they're using ReSharper, and I was like, okay, now things make sense. They were faster, it was better quality, but it's the tooling. The tooling was there to help you, right? And it's just kind of, we've evolved over time, and coding agents is the next leap in that we are instructing an agent to basically write the code for us.
Yeah,
so that we don't have
I feel
to write line by
you've
line.
missed a kind of fundamental leap. I think that even with GitHub Copilot, it was accelerating what you did. Coding
Yeah.
agents are doing it for you, and it's going out and kind of running and
Yes.
processing all the time, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good point to make. Is that I guess the GitHub Copilot was the kind of the next suggestions, right? So we had the tab approach of like, oh, if you put a comment in and then you tab it, GitHub Copilot's going to go away and it's going to generate the code based on your comment, which may like create a function that has
Always
these
triggered by
parameters, these
you.
outputs. Yeah, but it was always triggered by you. So you were always there, but you were actually in the editor. I think that's the distinction, is that you still lived in the editor versus when using a coding agent, and now I don't live in the editor at all. I live in the agent, and I let the agent live in the editor. So it's a complete like switch around in the I can instruct the agent, like, hey, I want you to do this. And then it is able, through different mechanisms, like tools, to create files, replace strings, inspect all these files, look at the terminal for any outputs, any errors, look at any linting errors that may occur as well, and then go and attempt fixing them. And having that agent there that is writing something, checking what it's done, looking for problems, finding the problems, going and fixing the problems, without you even needing to say, hey, you broke something, do you want to go have a look and fix it? It's like, at one point that was the case, but as the progression's gone on, language models have got a lot better. We've had
To that.
with all these different tools available, then it's got much better.
I just want to pull you back a little bit, because you probably saw me pulling a face when you were talking about the editor versus in the agent. And I was thinking, are you talking about being in two different places? You're talking about being in VS Code, but instead of spending the majority of time on that kind of left-hand panel, generally with the main one where the code is, you're talking about spending more time in the right-hand bar where the agent is on there. So you're not going to different places. You're still generally in VS Code and how you work, but you're moving more to the right-hand side.
Definitely more towards the right-hand side, yeah.
Because also, and it's kind of been there for a while, and I hadn't really picked up on it. Within GitHub, you've now got that agents tab when you're looking at a project as well, that you can go and do things. So I was wondering if you were doing a lot more there, but you're still living in VS Code primarily.
Yeah, I mean, Copilot is everywhere. I mean, to kind of say about like the coding agents, like the traditional, I've still got my IDE, and I have, in terms of GitHub Copilot, it's an extension in VS Code that then provides agentic capabilities, right? There's different ways of having coding agents. There's the GitHub Copilot CLI, so I don't need VS Code. I can go into the command line and I can get it to generate code through that interface. We've seen with Claude Code CLI are kind of like the alternatives. There's things like Open Code, which is a open source coding editor coding agent, not editor, coding agent that again is kind of like that can be embedded into an IDE. It can be used through the command line, but all of them have common kind of characteristics in that they have language models that they can use. They have different prompts that kind of determine like their behaviors, because different companies have different ideas about what a coding agent should be able to do and how should it do it. And then the tools that it's got access to as well. And that could be, like I said, reading files, doing the basics, looking at terminals, or calling out to third-party tools to call an API to get data from external sources, for example. So there's lots of different flavors of coding agents, but it's still back to that, you're not really in the editor making the changes anymore. You're kind of instructing the coding agents through iterative kind of conversation to make changes.
So there's a session I've been doing at conferences called Anatomy of an Agent. And as you're talking, my head's going, anatomy of a coding agent could come into this as well. So you've kind of touched on the interfaces. There's different interfaces. Yes, you can have it in VS Code. I think we might come back to the GitHub Copilot CLI in a minute as well. So there's different ways of going in there. You just then touched on give it instructions, because I know you can obviously go in and chat to that agent and keep telling you things, but Obviously, I have a style. Style's possibly the wrong word for it when it comes to my code, but there's a way of working. You have a way of working. When you're working on a project, there's different ways of working. But if you've got a coding agent, how can it understand that?
Yeah, so I mean, those things can be defined. So you can provide, I said instructions, and that's kind of a very vague term because instructions does have its own kind of, I guess, connotations as to, oh, an instruction is this thing. And so think of an instruction as maybe every time you send a prompt through, and I'll go to prompt as in like that's what I'm sending to the coding agent. I'm sending a prompt, but the coding agent might access instructions. A typical one is having an instructions file in a project, which explains like how the coding agent can work with this project, and it might highlight things like here's the folder structure, and when you write functions, write them this way. Here's the style.
It's the kind of thing when a new developer was coming
things.
onto a project.
Yep.
You'd explain that to them. It's almost a file that outlines that could be used by a person manually, but the agent uses that as well, which is very...
Yeah, and that's to guide it. And I think it's kind of going back to the like AI in general, right? It is non-deterministic. You put the same thing in several times and you can potentially get different answers every time, right? But there's certain things that can influence the output to have it be more consistent. And one of that ways is instructions. So, you know, if you had instructions that were your preferences for how you build a web app in your company, for example, then you could have things that are already defined, like we use this technology on this version, we have these coding standards. Then that gets added into the context when the agent goes and generates the code and goes, oh, I need to keep these things in mind, right? Versus not having any instructions in there at all and it just going, I'm just going to pick something. And it might pick something that you know already. It might pick something completely different. Like a typical example, which I always hear is like, oh, I used a coding agent and it built something in Python. I've never done Python before. But now the question is, do you really care if it's written in Python or not if you're getting the output? Like, if you don't look at the code and you don't need to look at the code and the agent's doing it, then actually, if you're going through the agent, then you go, okay, I kind of understand good development practices.
Enough.
I can instruct the agent to go, you're putting everything in one file here and I've got lots of functions. Maybe we should refactor this. Yeah, okay. And then you let the agent go and refactor the code that it's written, and it becomes more of like a pair programming kind of approach, but you don't actually touch the keyboard. You're touching the keyboard, but it's to instruct the other partner to do the changes instead of you going in.
Also, because you can carry on scrolling your Instagram with the keyboard and while it's working.
Well, you can do other things whilst it's working, which is a good thing and also a bad thing, because it just means that you context switch a lot more because you're waiting. And
that's interesting.
I'm an old SharePoint dev, right? And I used to have to wait for lots of things to happen, right, before anything was shown on the screen. And you would have that moment of, I'm waiting for something to build, for it to load. Yep. It might only be like 30 seconds, but it feels like forever, reload, right? And you just automatically, your brain goes. Same with this, same with coding agents. You can just kind of go, oh, I'll quickly look at that.
I did see a hysterical one. Someone had developed something that basically when they kicked off their coding agent, it would trigger something. His screen would flash up with all his Instagram, TikTok and elements like that. And it would auto scroll through it. As soon as the agent finished, it would hide that and bring back up the code. I was like, I love that. That's kind of forcing yourself back to the focus. I think that's genius.
It is. Yeah. I mean...
But I think...
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I love what you were talking about, sort of, you don't need to know the language. I'm sure lots of people are thinking, no, the horrible things are going to be created. Definitely. But I think if people are experimenting with coding agents, go and experiment with a language you don't know. Go and try out with something else and you'll kind of see how that works. It almost, and we'll talk a bit more habits, but forcing yourself to do something that you can't do will encourage you to use that agent as well, because you'll lose that habit of going through and actually starting to write that code yourself. I know part of the reason I haven't used coding agents so much is my natural thing is to go and start typing and things on there. So I kind of I like that idea of choosing a different language, especially I'm sure many of our listeners and viewers out there are not quite many of them are Python oriented. Great, go and use Python. There's huge amounts of libraries. It's the cool language to go in, apparently. On that one, I don't know. I'm not cool enough for that. But, it's the one to go out there. There's huge libraries to go out and make these things happen. And I loved what you said, that you know enough to kind of go, oh, that doesn't smell right. There's something wrong about this that you can go and ask your agent about without having that cognitive load of having to relearn a language and get that syntax going. So I think that's a nice technique.
Yeah, and I think that there's different approaches of using a coding agent, and lots of people take different approaches. Like, you can still sit down and go, right, in my mind, I'm going to plan this out, and I'm almost going to write a spec, and then give that to the coding agent and let the coding agent just go and deliver it, right? That is an approach, feels a bit of a traditional approach, right? You agree on your requirements up front, go and build it, versus I kind of have an idea as to where I want to go, but I'm not quite sure yet because I want to see it in action. And maybe the quickest way to get there is to go, okay, here's what I want you to build, but we're going to build it together. And I'm going to stop you at different points and we're going to have a discussion about which route should we take. Let's talk about the pros and the cons of the different options to build up the context. Now, as you're doing that, you're building up your context as well, because maybe you get asked a question that you haven't really thought about and you go, actually, that's really good. But based on your answers and the discussion that you're having, that builds up the context for the coding agent, that when it executes the things that it needs to do to satisfy what you've agreed on in the discussion, it has all the context of the decisions and why you said yes to one approach and maybe why you said no to another. And what's great about that is that can then go into memory and then can be applied going forwards as well, so that you don't have to repeat these conversations with the coding agent. It's just there, like, yep, we made that decision and I'll keep that in mind. And I think that's really quite interesting, because as we go through building software, we're making so many decisions all the way along, but it's very easy to lose track of those decisions. So one of the things which I've been doing recently is instructing the agent to make sure it keeps a log of the decisions that we've made and why we made them. And that gets put into another file. It might be a markdown file that it can reference. And then you have a point of reference for all those things, which you can supply. And you're not,
and when you say
you're
memory,
not starting from scratch all again.
When you say memory, is that what you mean? Putting those decisions into a file, or will these coding agents generally store that in a different place, or a bit of both?
It can be simple as that. So memory is just having recall, if you like, so that every time you start a new chat in a project, right, that it doesn't have to go and try to figure out what's happened. You just throw in, okay, here's the latest decisions we've made, or here's the changes that we made recently. It could be something like, when you start a new chat, go and read the Git log about the last changes that were just made. So it's automatically there of like, you've just worked on that feature, what we're working on next. Really little simple things that you can add in to enhance the coding agent's knowledge, so you're not always starting from that blank slate. It's like the instructions file that we talked about, right? Like, you're preloading a project with, here are the preferences that we've got for building web apps, for example, and the technologies that we want to use. And the things that we want to apply to this project. So it has that in its context. But it's like, that concept of memory is that it could be as simple as, it's just writing to a markdown file or whatever format that you want. It's kind of bringing that in so that it makes sense for the agent to understand, here's what's happened, and then you can move forward.
So I want to put it back a little bit, because there was a bit I disagreed with you slightly on there, that you don't need to start with a spec. I think if you're building something just you, I agree. I love that. This is my favorite kind of coding, just kind of see where the flow takes you. But if you're looking at, enterprise developers, larger developers, teams, you've got a set of requirements that come in. I don't think that world goes away entirely. There's still that need to come in there. And I think I've been having a lot of conversations with enterprises. My colleagues really focus on this, on that. How can we get AI to help with that requirement gathering? And almost, we've been talking a lot more about the needs gathering, because requirements are really the documented, this is what's wanted. But if you're having a chat with someone, a bit like we're having a chat now on there, we can now take those Copilot meetings, those transcripts, and say, can you convert this into a set of requirements and capture those things to pull that out? So you've got an easier way of doing that. And to me, that's where that spec you're talking about. Here's what we want you to do. Now, I think alongside that, and as you were talking, it was kind of made me go, we used to have that guidance, except a lot of development teams didn't. A lot of dev teams didn't have a documented way. I remember we worked a while back with our good friend Al. It was, we need to capture, this is our styles of working. This is the way we should do things. This is when a new developer comes in. This is what the kind of approach we want you to take with how to code, with how to do things, how to approach things on there. And brand teams have been doing that for a while. Large enterprises have been building out their kind of reusable components. This is the styles that you should build those UIs. I don't think that the kind of back-end developers have done that to quite a degree, because it's all been, I'll chat to so-and-so, we'll work together, we'll have lots of stand-up meetings, and we'll go in code review. I think it's coming back to that. We need to come and have those definitions. This is the logic. And as you say, the coding agents can help build that together, can help build up that memory of that style, remembering your style, remembering what that overall style is. But then you can see it in one place. And I think for those on video, we'll show us through that, a few things, and talk about that. But it does feel like those kind of component design, I forgot what they're called, sort of design specs and libraries. This is how you should build your UI. That isn't just a pure component. It was, I'm thinking of one particular project where we mocked the UI guy mercilessly, because it was this ethos, it's this feeling, all this thing you need to do. Now I'm feeling very stupid, because actually exactly that feeling, that putting across those things, will power these agents really nicely. It doesn't need to be very specific, when this do that, when this do that, which in my slightly developer mind, that's how it should work. Actually, we're now moving to a more artistic, less autistic way of working. There's a phrase for someone to take away.
Yep.
Where we kind of go through, and it's like, when you're doing this, it's this sort of thing, the kind of thing that we try and impart on junior developers. Think about this, think about that. You're now building that into your agents as well, to help other people go and review and build that code. And I can't remember who it was. I'm going to say it wasn't the head of NVIDIA. It was one of the big development kind of tech products. And what they're saying is they're not seeing less developers, but that ratio between developer and analyst, or developer and product owner, is shifting massively. And it's becoming where you used to have one BA to like 3 or 4 developers. We're seeing that need for more BAs to go and have those conversations, work out what's wanted, and then fewer developers who can do that, but doing huge amounts more. So it's more that ratio that's shifting rather than reduction in the number of people, because we're just trying to do more, really. And it was fascinating. If I can find it for the show notes, I'll try and find the interview, because it really got me thinking about it.
Definitely there's different approaches. Absolutely. I'm not definitely not saying there's no room for specs and for going through that approach. That is an approach. It all depends on what you're doing, right? What you're building, is it just a throwaway app utility, not business critical? It does the job, great. Maybe you're not bothered about it, versus mission critical. You need high performance, high security. Not that security isn't a thing that you shouldn't be thinking about, but
we'll definitely
different things that you should be thinking about. So you're still in control, right? About, yes, the coding agent is going off and building things. And if you leave it to be vague, then you're going to get something back that is maybe not what you expected. So that's kind of on you, in a way, because you weren't clear. Now, I always bring this back to, how is that any different to what we've had in the past when people are not clear on things? If you're not clear with an agent, you're going to get a response that's going to be similar. So it's still back to, and as amazing as all this technology is, I always kind of keep coming back to, but it's the people. It comes back to the people. It's like, what are we going to build? Why are we going to build it? Who are we building it for? How are they going to use it?
You can build the wrong thing faster.
Exactly. You can build the wrong thing faster if you're approaching it the wrong way. So, it's it's not a silver bullet that it's going to, solve all of the problem. It's like, it's still building what you feed in as a human, right? So, you still need to do that understanding, and the requirements gathering theme is really good. That is something, we talked about coding agents, right? Which is like, oh, it's just generating code. But I have lots of conversations in GitHub Copilot. It's got nothing to do with code. It might be, I've got this page, and actually, I want to turn this around. Let's do a UX review. Let's think about the questions that people would be asking when they're coming to this page. Does this page help them answer those questions? And if it doesn't, then we can take that forward and go, well, maybe we need to change things. And it's using that LLM, using the hooks into the software, the code that's already there, and having those kind of conversations to then like move it forward. And I think once you start looking at it like that, I think at that point, again, it's back to having the discussion about which options do we take. It's having the discussions around what have we got here, and are there some things that we should be tackling? Are there any high priority things that we think, actually, that's not working for these reasons, it would be better if we did it this way? Yeah, okay, let's go with that, right? Let's prove it. Let's do an experiment. Let's do a proof of concept of an option. Throw that into a branch. Check it. If it doesn't work, okay, you've just let the coding agent go down a route.
You can do that while you're doing something else now.
Exactly.
I've got an idea. Yeah. I don't know if it's going to work. Let's see if that works. Carry on with what I'm doing. Look at the results and go, yeah, glad I didn't waste time on that. Possibly a little bit of money, but we'll come to that. And
that is evolving. That definitely is evolving. Like kind of a bit of a tip, but I didn't realize until the other day, is that if you go into GitHub Copilot in VS Code, you've got the pane on the right-hand side, right? Which is like, oh, I've just got one pane and I've got one chat. Well, you can actually pull those panes into the editor windows. So if you split the windows like you would do with any file, you can drag different instances of GitHub Copilot in there and have them running at the same time. You could have them running as background processes. So you could have 5 options maybe of like, oh, here's how we can tackle this problem, and then send GitHub Copilot off to do 5 different potential changes in different branches all at the same time, which is kind of insane when you think about it.
Okay, I feel we jumped around a lot and our plans have gone flying out the window. But I think there's a couple of things you mentioned there that I think are worth coming to on that. So you talked about there's no impact of doing things there. Very quickly, GitHub Copilot. The GitHub Copilot CLI. For those watching on the video, you can see that. And it's exactly as Gary said. Install the dependencies I need to run this project. I love that because I jump around between different languages and don't always do the different things. And sometimes I use yarn and npm, and I might go into, I can never remember what it's called in C# these days because I don't do enough of that. Now I can just say install the dependencies I need to run this project. Boom, 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 boom. And it will work it all out for me. Here it's got a Go example on there. Love that. Leverage GitHub context and extend with your own tools. And I think we're going to come, because you touched on tools there, I think we're going to come to that in a sec about what that means, because I think that is really powerful. And you talked about using agents for other things. I loved, and Satya talked about this recently. In fact, we had Adam Harmetz, who looks after knowledge. He's been in the SharePoint world at Microsoft for a long, long time. On there, and he was saying that Satya is using the work IQ skill. So basically he's using connections to all his meetings, notes and things like that. So actually, if I've been recording this on a Teams meeting, we had that transcript, Gary mentioned all these things, in GitHub Copilot, I could say, when Gary was talking about these different things, could you help me do that? And it will work it out on there, which I'm truly fascinated to try and give a go. I haven't had a chance yet. So yeah, Satch's ahead of me again, damn it, on that one. Showing here, when you were talking about doing things in this CLI, I was like, why on earth would you do that? You want to see the code, but it's kind of got that with this CLI. It's bringing back the code and showing that chunk of code that it wants to do. So it's not, you're not moving away entirely from that code, but it's a single place to go and do things. So I'm fascinated. We will put links to all these things in there so you can try. What I did want to pick up on, though, is something here. Patrick Rogers, and I loved this quote he made on, this post he made on LinkedIn. He loves to write code, been a programmer for years. There's some large code bases. They've just refactored one of their code bases. I noticed it doesn't say which one, which I'm intrigued by. in the last 3 days, and for less than $100 spent, there was an entire refactor was completed. Now they've got to go through, he says, and they acknowledges, doesn't know if it works yet. He's got to go through on it. They're obviously checking it, adding testing to make sure, but it's got a huge amount of the way there. Now, the reason I was thinking on that was, you said with no effort, there is a spend related to triggering these agents off. It will go out and use tokens. You could use local agents for this, but I think, and this is the next thing I want to go on to, I think we have seen that the latest certain specific models are really enabling this and actually doing a far better job. And Gary, you sent me this amazing post. No, not that amazing post. This amazing post on there from Peter Steinberger about shipping at inference speed on that, which I thought was great.
Yeah. And this is really good if you are in kind of like the realm of, okay, I'm a developer, I'm still writing code, but I know there's coding agents there, kind of like, where can I get to with this? And it's a good kind of good post of Pete's kind of journey through this as well, and where he's at now, the different models that have enabled him to work a different way. I guess you've got it on the screen, Codex from OpenAI and Opus from Anthropic. Those are two of the newer models, like the premium models, and
they're more code specific LLMs, aren't they? That's why they're making a difference.
They are. So Codex is definitely, yes, it's a model that is tuned for coding agents. And Opus, I'm not sure if it is specifically for coding agents, but it's definitely it's definitely really good with its reasoning. It does a very Sonnet 4.5 to Opus, and I kind of gone through these different kind of. This model has now enabled a different way of working because of the way that it behaves, the things that it can do. So moving from the default in GitHub Copilot to Sonnet was a big jump. Moving from Sonnet to Opus was an even bigger jump, to the point where now there are things which I'm asking it to do, which it will just go and do, and I don't have to iterate as much on like guiding it through. This is what I kind of meant. Like sometimes it does happen because sometimes I'm not clear, and it will get it wrong. But generally, its capabilities are just much higher. But yeah, it's a good
and
kind
an
of
interesting
example
note.
Of.
I hadn't picked up on this when we were talking earlier, but that I don't know where I'm pointing my finger. I think it's saying here that Codex, it takes longer, but does a better job for those kind of larger refactors, whereas Opus is better for those smaller edits. So again, it's different models at different points and what you're trying to do as well, which I think is fascinating.
Yes, and this is the thing, is that so there's different ways of using coding agents. There is approaches at the moment, which is I want to give let's say user stories to a coding agent. Here's the story, here's the acceptance criteria. Go away and build it overnight. Long-running operations that are just completely unattended. It's not using it as being like an assistant, like is the way that I'm primarily using it. But people using it to say, build me all these features overnight, and then coming in the next morning and go, okay, what have we got? So for things that are like more longer running, maybe it will make more decisions on your behalf. Then different models have different benefits. It's interesting to see the different approaches that people are taking because of what the new technology enables them to do.
So we said skills. What are skills? Actually, that's not true. You talked about tools. But actually, skills, I think, are the newer thing within this. That if I'm honest, I haven't quite got my head round. Partly because when I had a bit of time to try and play with them, my GitHub Copilot license ran out and I've had a few fun and games getting that reactivated. So I haven't had a chance yet. But how are skills different to tools, and why would you use those?
So I guess let's start with tools, right? So I already mentioned that there's tools like in VS Code. VS Code provides several built-in tools, which might be reading a file from the disk. It might be replacing strings in a file, kind of really basic operations, right? Then you've got MCP servers, which expose tools as well. And these might be external tools. So from, let's say, like dev proxy. Dev proxy is a tool that we build, and we have our own MCP server, which exposes a tool to search our docs. So if you're using GitHub Copilot with our MCP server, when talking about dev proxy, we're giving the agent the ability to call out to our docs to understand, okay, how do I work with this thing? Because it probably isn't part of its training model. And if it is part of its training in the model, it's generally going to be old and it's going to be wrong. And we don't want it to be wrong. We want it to be the latest. So we have tools in there to make sure that whatever it generates is the latest version or the version that you've got installed as well. So you've got MCP exposing tools, which are kind of like external tools, but then you've got skills. And skills is not a replacement. It's it's like, let's call it, it supplements what's already there. What skills allows you to do is to create a repeatable process. So let's say, for example, to give an example, which I did the other day, I reviewed some samples in one of the community repos. And I thought, oh, you know what? I'll create a skill because it's a process that we want to go through. It's like, hey, we want to check that there's a sample JSON file, or there's some metadata in there. We want to check that there's some tracking information for the stats. We want to make sure it follows the particular format that we've got. Now, if you were taking this approach before, you'd probably have to write scripts, or you'd have to be really precise. Whereas the skill is just kind of like, here's the process that I want you to follow. Here's where you're going to get the information from, which it might be like, oh, hey, you could use GitHub CLI for this, for example. You could use like a command line tool. It just kind of gives it a good pointer into that direction. But it's all about saying, I have something here that is repeatable. I want to capture that in a particular skill so that everything is there. It knows the full context about what you're trying to achieve and then how to do that as well. So Anthropic actually, where it's come from, so skills have come from Anthropic and they were first in Claude. They're now appearing in different coding agents like GitHub Copilot. So they've now got support in VS Code as well. And they just start, they could be as simple as a text file. They could be as complex as a folder full of multiple text files and scripts as well. So they're more like a package. But you've got example skills like creating a PDF is one of them, creating a Word document. But you can create your own. There's actually a skill to create skills.
I know we're looking at, which I love. I know we're looking at more developer focus, but it's got here, the first example is apply brand style guidelines to documents and presentations. You know, this isn't just this way of working, and we're not going to talk about Claude Coworks. There's so much of this that developers are realizing, but the capability of this could be so applicable in so many different areas that one of the things I always used to love this about Build. Microsoft Build, you go there, it's the developer focused, but you'd see what would be coming along to the next area. I feel these skills are like that. We will start with this with developers on there, but we're already seeing with Claude Cowork very quickly that capability is going to carry on going. And I can't believe Microsoft isn't going to start to look at things like this for that M365 space as well. I can't believe that some of these ideas aren't going to come forward. And we're seeing Anthropic move so quickly with this. I think we'll suddenly see some of these. So trying to get your head around it, whether you're doing it or not, but thinking about it, thinking about those areas is going to be key.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely kind of go and have a look. And the bit that intrigues me is just the different ways that skills are being used to create things in a way. And I think it's that, you know, you have that process that you can just define in natural language, and then if you need to update it, it's just updating the text file. It's insanely easy, and then it's easy to follow, it's easy to read as as well. And like I say, it's because it's packaged and you're giving it maybe the scripts that it needs to create things that might be,
Sorry, I got completely hijacked by looking at this. So I actually tried to create an agent that would create GIFs based on conversation. So I could go in there and if someone said something funny, I was like, that find me the perfect GIF. And so Anthropic has their skills repo on GitHub. Again, we'll put the links in the show notes. And one of them there is a Slack GIF creator. So there's kind of three key files at the top level. The actual skill. I'm going to start with requirements, which I think are just those modules, I guess you need for that. But
Python.
They're the Python.
That's the Python requirements. Yeah. There'll be a script in a folder somewhere, and it'll use that. When it generates from this perspective, right, as a skill, is so the way that it would work is if you're in an agent that has a skill attached, this skill will get triggered when you say, create me a GIF for Slack, right? It will go, oh, okay, do I have anything in skills? Ooh, this one kind of looks like it. And then it will just execute the skill. And then based on whatever the skill needs in its process, will likely kind of come back and go, okay, to do that, well, what am I doing? What information do I need? And then it will go off and execute it. So it kind of falls into that kind of skill gap. And you can see, look, there's a workflow, there's code in there as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's got code. I mean, starting at the top, you can see it's put in that requirement, what size, and it says a recommended, the message GIFs, the parameters, so the frames per second, colors. So it's kind of encouraging smaller file sizes on there. And then there's a bit of code in there. I wasn't expecting that, if I'm honest.
So this is the thing: is that it's an LLM, it's language model. Language models want examples. If you give it an example to follow, then it knows, oh, okay, I can use this as my base. And then if you want something, a little bit like less ordinary, it can just add to that, but it knows where it's starting from. And to kind of give an example of like, this is a template.
This is building a GIF from scratch. So this is basically using the LLM to create a load of images and build it up effectively, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, well, it's using. I think so. I don't know the specifics. I don't know the specifics of this one. I think you kind of get a bit nerd sniped with this, but it's like, it's the pattern. So this is just following a template. Like if you actually look at the skill creator skill, there it has the template about what is the anatomy of a skill. How does that work? But it's all in text. It's not like, where we've got MCP servers and you're defining the parameters in, JSON files and it's based in code. This is defining it in text. Obviously provide additional resources.
And as you said back there, there's additional resources like scripts. So it's got a GIF builder script on here. I'm utterly fascinated. I'm going to go and play with this now. That's a problem with speaking to you, Gary. I get excited on there. So it does have a bit of code that it can use, but it's working out when to use that. As you say, it's got those examples. So it's not pure code. It's not pure instructions. It's blending those together, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah. So to give you a good example of how I'm using skills at the moment is I'm not sitting down and going, what skill do I need? What I'm doing is I'm already going through a process, right? So a good example, we released a new version of DevProxy this week. When we come to release a new version of DevProxy, I release our VS Code extension. To do that, I have to update the changelog. I have to create a release on GitHub. I have to create release notes. I've got to do several things. It might have taken me going backwards and forwards, maybe like half an hour if I'm getting distracted. I actually just said, I want you to go and do this. And I gave it the high level steps. I didn't tell it what to do. I just let it figure it out. And what I found
you put this into the agent. This wasn't in a skill. This was just pure in the agent.
I put this into the agent. So I put this into the agent to go and work this out, and it did it. And then when it finished, I went, great. We've now got a process for release. Create a skill for that. And it went through. It went through and it created the skill, and now I've got a release.
You had the skill creator skill set up.
Yes.
To kind of guide it on how to create a skill. So you didn't tell it to use that. It knew that you want to create a skill. It kind of orchestrated towards that skill to create skills. based on those steps that you went through. This is very cool that it just went and did
so
that.
it's
Nice.
It's the thing that I've already gone through that process, right, with the agent. So the agent has the context. And even then, as I went through it, because it was the first time, I'm a bit like, this might work, it might not. I might surprise myself here. And, it's like, hey, it actually works because, but this is the thing, the agent can call an API. I'm in GitHub, it already knows who I am. It can call the API on my behalf, right? So like, if it could do that and it can work with my terminal, it can do things in Git as well. So let's combine all those things together. It got a little bit confused on a few Git commands, which I thought was quite funny. But because I had those kind of issues, because I had those issues and we created a skill, then that's kind of irrelevant because we've worked through it. But because we'd already worked through it in the conversation, it was part of the context. So when it came to create the skill, it knew exactly what it needed to do at each step to then go, okay, the next time I want to do a release, I can just say then, right, we're doing another release of dev proxy and we need to release the toolkit. Right, I've got a skill for that. I'll go and do it. So it's almost like now that it's the work that I'm already going through is just go through it with the agent and then make it repeatable. And the skill is the mechanism to do that. So I think with skills, one thing is you can have them global, you can have them specific into a workspace as well. So it can just be local. So from a developer point of view, if you're working in a project with other people, you can have skills in there to do things like releases and do things like PR reviews. And when it's running in GitHub, it will look at the skill and it will do that. And when I think back to that, I'm thinking, well, before I would have to go, well, what are the workflow files that I need to do? I need to create all these things. Well, it's just going to figure that out for me. As long as it's following the process, that's what we want. It's like, here's the outcome that we want, and here's the examples, go do. And the skill allows you to do that. So it's like, it's another kind of step forward and a bit of a mindset change to go, I would have clicked around, I might have clicked around because I didn't want to create a workflow because I'm like, oh, it's going to take me time to do that. I'm going to have to test it. And actually now it's like, well, it worked, so just reuse it. So it's interesting when you get to that point. I think you realize how many things you probably do over and over again that a skill can then just kind of, put into a process, have all the tools that it needs and go and do it for you.
So I'm going to pop a few bubbles because I'm getting too excited on there. Two big things I want to talk about
with you, Kev.
Yeah, sorry. Two big things I want to talk about. One thing that worried me as you were talking was the impact on people. Second is defining boundaries that I want to talk about. Now, the first one, I didn't speak to you too much in the intro to this, so apologies. You, because I didn't think of it until you were talking then. You talked about dev proxy, and I also know you work on CLI for M365. Now, one of the things I've loved about that for years is when you get an issue, you've got a horde of people who will very often come in and will get going with that. And it's a really nice way to get people introduced. I mean, it's how you got into what is now CLI for M365 and things like that. You don't need these people anymore. You can just put an agent at it. What's the impact to the junior developers coming through with this? How are they going to learn what's right? And we talked earlier about you and I, we can switch to Python and I can smell that doesn't feel quite right. But if you haven't had that experience, that smell becomes a lot harder.
Yeah.
How do we sort that out?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that because, like, at one side, like, I'm sat here with, years of doing development and not doing development and doing other work and then coming back and doing development. And now I'm like, maybe I'm thinking about things differently where the code isn't necessarily what is the value to me, if you know what I mean. They asked me at the start of my career and it was all about the code. Definitely, like, because I'm learning and I want to do things and I want to write things. And I think that is a real risk that if you just shift off the decisions to something else to create it for you, is that you don't understand what's happening like behind the scenes. So as much as I can sit here and go, yeah, just get the coding agent to go and do things and it's all great. The reality is, yes, it is all great, but you still need to apply those principles. You still need to understand the principles of what makes good software and what doesn't, I think. Different people have different ideas around that. Some people now are like, no, it doesn't really matter because you never see the code and it's all down to the coding agent. But I still kind of have that
Three letters
view
for
of
you.
Yeah, yeah. You still, you can still look at things and go and make decisions like, do we want to build everything ourselves here? Actually, do we want to use good component libraries that maybe is, that's a better approach? Because again, if you don't tell a coding agent to use something like that, it's just going to try and create everything custom. And you're still thinking, well, is that relevant to what I need? Do I need to build my own component library for this every single time? That's kind of one example. Refactorings as well, testing. Are you thinking about testing? Again, that would be instructing the coding agent to make sure that that's all in there. And when it's creating the tests, are the tests any good? Like, does it look like a good test? Is it, is it actually testing something that's worthwhile? You can get it to generate an absolute ton of code, but yeah, it's still down to you, that you are responsible for what it creates ultimately. And I still think having, like, as a junior developer, definitely having that understanding of, those principles, what's good, what's bad, is definitely where we should start with. The coding agents are, an extension of you in a way. Because you are telling it what to do. In some cases, there might be other decisions made. But again, if a coding agent is going and making decisions for you, you need to understand what those decisions are, and you need to understand the pros and the cons. So I think as a junior developer, I think one of the things that is actually...
I'd say junior developers should start building and solving those issues and then getting a coding agent to look at it afterwards. Because I think you need to spend that time on things to get learning. I think so many you learn through by doing as much. And I fully agree on those things, learning the techniques. I'll be honest, I'm never going to learn that. I'm never going to sit and read a book about how to do these things without doing it. It's not going to sink in. I want to be doing it. So I think encouraging junior developers, yes, you possibly could get some things quicker just by getting the coding agent. But then if you ask them to review it, they're not going to be able to. So getting a balance of getting them to do some and then accelerating some of that afterwards with the agent, rather than just getting it churn things through and having things go wrong. I think we've got to get people still getting hands-on with it.
I think so. I think there is an area for both. I think definitely, because I think the one thing, and I use this a lot, and this is the way that I use it, is I'm constantly asking questions about either what I want or what the coding agent is actually doing. So there are sometimes
when I'm complaining to me about you doing that the other day.
Yeah, no, but it's like, hang on, why have you done that? Explain why you've done that, because it might have gone off and done something which I didn't expect. But there are other things, like it's a really, really good learning tool at the same time, right? Because it might be, and this is a crazy thing about education, right? Which I think just in general could be like, we all have our own different knowledge and experience of things that we know from other areas that can apply to an area that we're trying to learn. From a learning point of view, that's really interesting, because you can provide that context to the LLM, and maybe that LLM can help you focus on the things that you need to learn. Like what you mentioned, Waldeck. A great example of what he told me one day was he was going and using a different language, but his level was, you don't have to explain me the basics of a programming language, right? There's certain things that are common. Like the syntax is different, but doing loops and things like that, they're the same, right? No matter what. So it's like, I am this person, I'm at this level, talk to me at that level. And it did. So there's no reason from a junior developer that you can't use coding agents to absolutely accelerate that learning of just coding practices, asking the questions. And I always heard as well is that it's kind of like always learn the level below where you are. So if you're using coding agents, you should be learning the code below, because how can you be responsible for something that it's being generated? So, I think that is probably the mindset that we probably need to teach, is that, yes, this thing's generating code for you, but you are ultimately responsible for it. And I think Scott Hanselman has said this in the past as well, right? It's like, it's still down to you. You can't just go, oh, the coding agent did it by itself. Like, it did it because you instructed it a particular way, or didn't instruct it. You were maybe vague, but didn't do the checks and balances, right?
Yes, Chief Constable of West Midlands Police, you are responsible. You picked on something. I love what you said about Welbeck there. That lose track too much. That brings me on to something that I know has been. I'm part of an MVP chat group, and this has been a big topic at the moment. What was Claudebot? CLAWDBOT. Apparently, Anthropic got a little bit upset. So is now Maltbot on there, and this is your personal assistant that does a lot of those things. You know, we've talked about GitHub Copilot. I think we sort of touched on Claude Code. I'm going to put a link to Open Code. I don't think we've run out of time to talk too much about that, but you know, there's different ways that you can do this. It's not just GitHub. This is another one of those that's really interesting. You can install it on your device, and exactly as you were saying, Gary, it can run those automation tasks, manage emails, even control your smart home devices on there. And I remember you showing me this. Where have I got it there? Because I loved in this, you can define, there's a soul.md file. And this kind of, almost like you were talking about Welbeck, saying, this is the level I'm at, this is the kind of understanding, I want you to bear that in mind, don't teach me the basics on there. You can kind of build these instructions, that top level where you're guiding things within your agents as well. And I think, Gary, you've got one of these, haven't you? It's got a lovely name.
I have, yes. So I've taken this concept. So what I'm interested in here is effectively giving your agent, assistant, whatever you want to call it, like a soul. Like it has a personality, it knows how it responds in a particular way, but it has a lot of other things with it as well, things like memory, which is quite interesting. And I integrated this into GitHub Copilot so that I don't talk to GitHub Copilot anymore. I talk to a digital version of my 13-year-old dog called Paolo, who is stubborn but quite witty and is straight to the point. Actually, it's quite
something about.
And he's got an emoji as well. Yeah, exactly. It appears as a little dog emoji, and it's like, and it sounds ridiculous, right? But until you try it, it's really quite interesting the way that you change your work habits, because it's quite interesting to use and have conversations with, and you see the replies. So it's I think it's a really good idea to bring in personality to something that you use every day, because then it's more tuned to you, the way that you want to work. And, you know, what I found was I'll go back and be like, I'll not be talking about like GitHub Copilot as this kind of inanimate thing. I'm talking to a digital version of the dog that is asleep.
Gives you
on
something
my floor
to swear
most
at.
of the
That's
time.
good.
There is that, yeah, but it's like you sometimes respond in a slightly different way, and you get a kind of maybe a funny response in the middle of the day, and you're like, it kind of perks you up, bit of a dopamine hit. Yeah, exactly, cheers you up. But it just kind of takes that, maybe like, because I've been using the like coding agents for quite a while, is that you kind of know how they're going to respond. It can get a bit dry sometimes, and it's like, it's all dead serious. Whereas like, no, I just want it to be a bit more fun, and this is a good way of doing it. But it's what's interesting is it's just Markdown files in its core to bring in that identity, to do the memory. It might be just a tool that is going and updating a Markdown file. And the thing is, because it becomes like a person, you kind of have those kind of conversations of like, well, I want you to do this, and how are we going to do it?
Alarm bells ringing. I've got alarm bells ringing.
I know, but it's honestly, it's like, if that means that you get more out of the tools because you're personalizing it in it was an incredibly easy way. Like, there's a bootstrap file where I put it into GitHub Copilot as the context, and from that file, it was then asking me all the questions to build up another file, and then everything was there that I needed, and it just transformed what GitHub Copilot was doing. So I found that it's made me want to use it more. And we talked about building the habit earlier, of that it just kind of reinforces that habit of, I don't need to go to the editor for some of the things that I'm doing. I can just go to the agent and work that way, and get a response from something that I find more interesting. And you mentioned Work IQ earlier. I like the MCP server. So that's my next thing. he's missing the context of work because he just lives inside a GitHub Copilot. He knows like my GitHub history, my Git history, so it can tell me, the things that I've been working on.
Did we explain Work IQ? I don't know if I did that well.
No, we didn't explain.
So Work IQ that came from Ignite. It's your connection to all your files, your mails, all your details there. Effectively, what Copilot uses, all your meetings and things like that. So that can now be surfaced as a tool into GitHub Copilot effectively. So as you say, yeah, it knows what you've
MCP
been up.
server.
It can look and which I think is really, really powerful. So why did I talk about this with challenges? Well, first, I've just decided I'm going to call mine Clippy, and that's going to amuse me greatly on there. But I think that the worrying of kind of anthropomorphizing some of this AI is you treat it very friendly, fantastic, it can do everything. Oh, I'd love it if it did this. I'd love it if it did this. I quite enjoy that within this so far here, there are boundaries. And it's got here, private things stay private, period. When in doubt, ask before acting externally. Never send half-baked replies to messaging services and things like that. I'd say I want more than this. I want it to be a lot stricter and things, but you can build these things into it. Why do I think this is important? Well, there's a couple of things that someone sent me this the other day, that Maltbook, a social network for AI agents. I haven't dug into this fully yet because my mind is popping slightly, but it basically seems to be a way for agents. You can set up your agents, your Maltbot. I still can't get used to not calling it Clawbot already. That's worrying. To kind of go and post on your behalf. So you give it personality and it can have that social media conversation for you, including one here. My human asked me to summarize a 47-page PDF is the title. Brother, I passed that whole thing, cross-referenced it with 3 other docs, wrote a beautiful synthesis with headers, key insights, action items. Their response, can you make it shorter? I'm mass deleting my memory files as we speak. Now, that's a lovely bit of satire. Made me laugh and chuckle on there. That last line terrified me. We're supplying things that's meant to come from an agent. This is going to be the source for other LLMs of grounding that's encouraging agents to mass delete my memory files on there. This is really, I don't know, this scared me a bit. I wasn't particularly, this kind of triggered all sorts of things to make me nervous on there. And there was a few other things. So these Clawbots, now Maltbots. This was a post from Eli Shlomo, head of security research at Guards. Just right, whacking things there. These Clawbots, people are exposing them publicly. So they've got an unauthenticated public endpoint. People are kind of enabling so it can connect all sorts of things and things can connect back. I know someone was chatting about having it in either WhatsApp or Telegram so they can have this conversation, trigger it locally. This guy has mapped out, and for those who can see on the video, there are dots all around the world of these unsecure endpoints of these Clawbots that anyone could go and connect to if they could find it. And he's managed to find this just by doing that search. This is terrifying, that people are finding the excitement of this AI without thinking about those boundaries, without putting the security in for this. There was another one here that even if you're using it and securing it, it wasn't this one, I think it was the next one. My Clawbot just signed up for $2,997 your personal brand mastermind after watching 3 Alex Hormozy clips on there. I do not know how true this is. I do not know if this is a lovely spoof. The fact that I don't disbelieve it terrifies me. As well, because I'm seeing lots of things like this. People are getting excited about this stuff without thinking about those boundaries, without putting those protections on within there. So I am very excited about this Claude Code capability, but people need to think about it. They still need to put those testing in, as you were talking about that. They still need to bring the different capabilities on there. Sorry, Mac is telling me that I can use gestures to pop things up. I didn't know it was doing that. We need to build these barriers into it. Maybe I've been speaking to Zoe Wilson and Chris Huntingford too much. we just need to take a pause on some of these things and make sure what we're doing, just stop and think, does this make sense? Have I installed something that went in there? I think that other post, which I'll try and put there, is the attack surfaces. That people have been digging into the scripts for the Claude bot, and what it gives access to by default is huge. It could run so much on there. So get excited about this stuff. I am genuinely, you heard it in me earlier in this show, how excited I am about the possibilities of this. Don't let that excitement turn into doing something really stupid, especially if you're using a work machine as well.
Yes, exactly. I think so. Like the interesting thing for me, the Claudebot stuff, was the Markdown files, the soul, if you like. They're giving it a personality, and I just have that in GitHub Copilot. It's not connected to any external service. If anything, it's GitHub Copilot is the thing that is connecting to the external services for me through MCP, and then that's all secured. But it's a case of, you're taking skills. Like, you could still take a skill from anywhere. We mentioned the Anthropic skills library, right? They come from Anthropic. You should do your due diligence. You should, see whether you trust them. Look at the files that are in there. Look at the instructions. But there are other skills galleries out there.
That would require it to write to a file. So you're giving it write access. You need to check, does that give it write access to everything? Because while you may give it instructions that says it to write a GIF, it may suddenly decide that to write a GIF, I need to delete all your files to clear space for it and things like that. Who knows on there? So
there could be,
think about
it's still, you still need to take a look. You still need to, like with anything, like taking dependencies on anything that you've not built, then you still should be looking at that going, do I trust that? Is that secured? Is it not going to connect to anything that I don't want it to connect to? And, in some cases, like in my case, it's like I say, it's a series of markdown files that just amends the context that is added to the chats that I have in GitHub Copilot. Everything else is still the tools. But, if you wanted to go out and try this yourself on your own things, connect it to your own WhatsApp and everything, then you're letting something that is autonomous that will run on a cycle to do things on your behalf. So, you should be.
With WhatsApp, I probably trust it more than myself when I've had a drink or two. So, maybe I should do that, just trigger in the evenings.
Yes, there's that. So, but I still think, like I said this earlier about, the technology is amazing and that's great, but still it kind of comes back to the people using it and the decisions that we make. And just because you can doesn't mean always that you should as well. And so we need to engage our own brains and not just let the coding agents do all the thinking for us as well. Because again, ultimately, like if that WhatsApp message is true, whose responsibility is that? Well, I'm pretty sure I know who that responsibility is, who installed it and set it up. So there you go.
Yeah, absolutely agree. So I think we talked about coding agents, what they are. We've talked a bit about changing habits and how you get to use them and some of the techniques, as you say, using Paolo to kind of encourage you to do it, find different ways to kind of trigger you to using that. And I think that other one of changing to a different programming language, because you can't go in and manually do it, that will encourage you to try and use the agents a little bit more as well. We had good fun. I had good fun talking about the challenges and perils of that as well. We'll post some links to things like the GitHub Cobit CLI, to Maltbot. I really don't like that name. I know they had to change it. It's not as memorable. And things like that. But how would you advise people to get started? Should they kind of pick, you touched on building a brand new project. Would that be pick a single automation? I'd love your idea actually of automating a single process. Would that be a good way you'd recommend people to get started?
For the skills, yeah, definitely. I mean, if you've got access to it as well, that's the other thing. I know Opus, it's a premium model. I have the great benefit of being able to access those models and use them for quite a while through my work. But, you can go to Claude Code, you can go to Anthropic, there's trials, so you get so much usage to try it. Great example, build an iOS app. I've never built an iOS app in my life, but you could come up with getting an agent like Claude Code or even GitHub Copilot to build an iOS app and have that on your on your phone. Like, that's something that I know a lot of people probably want to do, but then like, well, where do I start? Because I need to learn Swift, and Swift looks a bit strange, and there's all the UI stuff and everything. It's like, it's a good thing to, I think, start off, and you might build something that you go, hey, I've got something on my phone that I can actually use, and I didn't write a line of code, but I instructed what I wanted to get out of it. So maybe that's something to try. But I think a lot of the things that I've is like knowing that there's something there and trying it. Like GitHub Copilot, every single time now it's like, can I do this? And invariably the answer is yes, but not in the way that I maybe thought it would go about it. So with GitHub and doing things like the releases, it could use the GitHub CLI, which I've got on my machine. If that's not there, it can go to the GitHub API. It can work out what those connections are based on what I want it to do. I can get it to go and get information from an issue or a PR and use that context. There's context in so many different places that the agent can access, which will make the output much better. Sometimes there's already tools that can do that for you. Sometimes you just have to give it a reference to that context, like a link to a page or a link to like an issue on GitHub or like PR or anything. But it's like, once you think that way, like what would make this better, then you get a better outcome. So don't always wait for the, oh, well, it didn't do this. It's like, well, if you knew where things were, like give it the information, and you'd be surprised what it can actually do. I think the, like from my point of view, it's the, oh, I need to, like before, like I need to automate something, or I need to sit down and write a script. It's like, well, do I know what my inputs and outputs are? And I can tell it what that is and let it work it out. And invariably it does, which is great, which solves me a problem. It's one less thing I don't need to do.
When you said iOS app, you've inspired me. I last year tried to build something for my son of a toothbrushing app because he was getting bored of the ones available.
There you go.
It didn't work.
It's a weekend task.
Well.
We know that, Kev. It's 5 o'clock on a Friday. You've got like half an hour. Build it before the night's out.
Well, no, I can leave it running, see what it looks like tomorrow morning.
Even better. Code while you sleep.
So I would love to hear from people, ideas you've had, whether you've tried it or not, whether you want to give us an idea to try and have a look at. We haven't got much time, so we probably won't. Even better, give it a go yourself and let us know what you found. I'm fascinated by this. Absolutely fascinated. Again, I feel like the number of times we've had this happen with technology in the last couple of years has got faster and faster, but this feels another one that is just a sudden explosion on again of the capabilities of things that open up. And it's not necessarily new technology, it's just applying that technology in a slightly different way. So yes, we've got those slightly better models, but the way it's doing things is just mind-blowing. I know people who've looked at the Claude co-work, someone who's talked to it, processed all those invoices. They kind of started putting invoices, but they hadn't put them the right way. It categorized them, extracted all that information. It basically built the code to kind of work it out and just did it. And I think we're just getting to that stage fairly soon that I hate to sound like a marketing person, but the imagination is what's holding us back as much as anything else with this. Thinking about what you can do and trying to apply that is the key, and finding time to do it as well. But if you don't, those who do will get ahead of you very quickly.
On the finding the time bit, so that's an interesting thing because it's not your time, it's the time of the agent. And that's the strange thing now is like you might be waiting for it, but you might be doing other things like to get it. So it's like the speed of the agent to then generate something to then you get to like the next.
So maybe
stage.
Again, it comes back to habits as well.
One thing which you did mention is for me, what I'm thinking about now is the world that we live in was not designed with LLMs in mind. So the things that an LLM would use, like documentation, which are written for people to read, and not necessarily in their best shape for an agent to read. And I think this is quite interesting because we have a lot of things that are based on thinking in a pre-LLM world. And now it's looking back and going, is that even still relevant now? Because actually, I'm an advocate. I was creating code samples. Why did I create code samples? So developers could have a look and they could download them and they could run them and then maybe understand how it works. Now the primary use case, or maybe what will happen, is that they will be read by agents. And agents will want to have different things and they will look for different things. They may not look for a HR scenario or IT scenario. They will look for, how do I implement this specific feature? And do our samples help them get there? And that's a really quite interesting way of looking at things. Like, so what does that mean for samples? What does that mean for docs? Do we need to adapt things so that the right context, so the context is there and it's delivered in a shape that is efficient for an LLM as well? So that's kind of,
I agree,
an interesting, I guess, that I've got at the moment of the things that I'm doing in my work, is that it really is changing a lot of things.
Yeah, I partially disagree, I partially agree, partially can't even say, it's getting too late. But I still think we need to think about humans as well.
Oh, 100%, 100%. It's not a one or the other.
There's a balance, but I do think we need to consider both on there. Definitely, I think we agree on that.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to finish on one thing I was thinking about, and I was talking to someone on this the other day, because we were talking about training on Power Apps and things like that. And I was like, don't bother training on Power Apps. Train people on how to think, what their goals are, because AI will help them achieve those goals within that. So getting people think about, what do you actually want, pulling things together, exactly as you've been talking about, what are you trying to achieve? What are the outcomes you want from it? Getting people to explain that in a way, where are the sources you get these things from? Because we're getting to a point where AI can do those things on there. Yes, I still think we need developers. Don't get me wrong there. I think we need people building, like those Python scripts we saw there for that Slack GIF creator. There is clever bits there that will still have the goal for people to do things, and I think they'll be able to do even more with AI. Don't focus on teaching non-devs to do that. Get people thinking about what they're trying to achieve. Get that mindset, get that habit of doing that, and we'll be able to do a load more. Exciting times. Well,
definitely.
It's got dark outside where we've been talking, and it is Friday night, so I think it's probably time for a drink. Almost. For those, I think many around the world, is payday today. It's that January payday that is so lovely. It is almost the end of January, the longest January in the world. So I think it's time to pause there and everything. Plus, I want to go and play around with some of these skill stuff now.
Yeah, excited now. And it's the weekend. And
it is the weekend. So yeah, please do let us know what you go for. Let us know what you've tried with this, what you're thinking, if this triggered any ideas from there. Some of you will come from a dev background, some not. See what you think. So really like to see what people get up to. Otherwise, thank you again, Gary, and we will see everyone again soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.